check my phone to see if people can see us. Barbara Boyd Doss, Hen Johnson, Kristen, Benjamin. All right, we've got people watching.
Beautiful.
Excellent. So everybody, we are officially in the month of October, and we are all about Halloween most of this month on Hollywood Kitchen. This is going to be the first of 3 Halloween themed episodes I am literally cooking up for you. And today we have something very unique and very special. This is his Hollywood Kitchen debut. Ladies and gentlemen, Lord Blood Rah.
My lords and ladies, I am honored to be here with Carrie Bible in the Hollywood Kitchen. I'm really looking forward to what you're going to cook up for us.
Yes, so tell some of our viewers about yourself, because I heard about you in the Bay Area, where you are a porter host of live events and television. But a lot of people may not know about you or what you do, and you've got some awesome stuff going on. So tell us about it.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm Lord Blood Rah. I host Lord Blood Rah's Nerve-Wracking Theater, which started out in 2009 as live events and then migrated to television. It's been on television now for about 9 years, I believe. I'm in season 12, as a matter of fact, is going to be coming out next year. It's syndicated. The best thing to do is go to lordbloodrah.com to find where you can see it online. I post an episode every week on that website, lordbloodrah.com. I've been doing it for years, both live and on television. I love it. I love presenting horror and science fiction films, and I've been working on a few new projects that we'll talk about a little bit later. But I'm a horror host. That's really all I can say about it. And I love doing it. I love presenting these films to people that enjoy it and people that really get into it.
Excellent. And I know you and I are both in the middle of our busiest seasons of the whole year. So thank you so much, by the way, for carving out some time to
thank you. It's due to the virus situation. It's a bit less busy than normal, but I'm working on a lot of stuff. So yeah, it definitely is busy time of the year.
All right. Well, I wanted to kick off October because this year marks the 80th anniversary of The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney. So Chaney Jr. So I wanted to kick off October with him. And today we're going to make Lon Chaney's famous Chaney pot, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But before we get into that, Lord Blood Rah, could you give us, or for people who are watching, kind of a basic 101 on Lon Chaney Jr.?
Well, we're talking about this gentleman here. If you can see that, there's not too much glare. Lon Chaney Jr., the son of the great Lon Chaney Sr., who of course was the Phantom of the Opera, Quasimodo from the Hunchback of Notre Dame, various other roles, both horror and non-horror, that saw him transform himself into both physically and mentally anguished characters that no one else portrayed. But of course, Lon Chaney Jr. is best known as the Wolfman, if you can see that transformation there. Larry Talbot, the cursed lycanthrope from 1941's classic, The Wolfman. He had a rather rough life. Lon Chaney Sr., though, of course, great actor, was not purported to be the best of fathers. His mother very publicly tried to commit suicide on stage. I believe it was in San Francisco, but I don't
know. It might have been in downtown Los Angeles, I think.
Might have been in Los Angeles. Yeah, you're right. And of course, that's that'll mess up a kid's mind. So he had a very rough childhood. Creighton Chaney was the gentleman's original name. And Lon Chaney really discouraged him from going into acting. As a matter of fact, for a while, he was a very successful executive at an appliance firm for quite a while. But after Lon died in 1930, Creighton Chaney went into acting at the behest of the studios, always thinking of marketing. They made him use the name Lon Chaney Jr. and basically launched his career. His big first role, big acting role, non-horror, of course, was Lenny of Mice and Men.
He's excellent in that.
Oh, he's absolutely amazing. He played that on the stage as well, and then transferred over to film. Absolutely amazing, and that's what really led to his acting career. We think of him primarily as a horror actor today, but he had a lot of very strong character parts in a lot of films. But of course, we think of him as the Wolfman today. His first horror role was the Man-Made Monster in the same year as the Wolfman, 1941. And then from there, he's had countless roles. He holds the distinction of being the only actor to play all of the classic Universal monsters. Of course, the Wolfman, he played the Frankenstein monster in Ghost of Frankenstein, Dracula, rather controversially, in Son of Dracula, and the Mummy in 3 films, which was reportedly his most hated role.
Getting that could not have been fun.
Oh, could not have been enjoyable at all. No, getting into that suit, which of course, must have had a zipper up the back, of course, but that makeup and, so he was quite an actor. I really doesn't get his due, I don't think, as an actor. To really see his acting chops, I mean, again, as Larry Talbot, he is the most tragic of the monsters, doomed to transform into this ravenous beast once a month. Well, more than once a month. I don't know how that works during a full moon. Full moon's only once a month, but it happens 2-3 times a month for them.
It's Hollywood.
It's Hollywood. That explains it all. It's Hollywood. But for the rest of the time, for him to be anguished and guilt-ridden and terrified at the next transformation to come up, that was his life. His character was about only wanting to die, and he was essentially immortal. So I would love to see his story carried on. I mean, the Benicio del Toro version of the Wolfman, I thought was great. A lot of people didn't care for it. I thought it was wonderful, but I would like to see someone do Larry Talbot today, take him right from the Universal films into today, because he must still be alive, because he can't die. Well, in the movies, he took a few dirt naps occasionally, but he can't die, so what would that character be like today, having gone through everything he's gone through in the past decades?
From your lips to the ears of Universal executives.
You can only hope. I mean, Universal, I think they're kind of on the right track now with trying to get Universal films remade, because like The Invisible Man, the recent film, was very interesting. Not the original Invisible Man, but a great take on an invisible monster, really. So yeah, I mean, they're trying to do very new things with the classic monsters, which is good, but I would like to visit the classic monsters, see what they're up to today. They've got to be around, right? Dracula's got to be around. The Frankenstein monster must be around. He's immortal. Poor Larry Talbot, of course. The Mummy, I don't know. The Mummy, I've always said that the Mummy was had the least work ethic of any monster, really. When you look at it, zombies are like the blue collar monster. They're at it 24/7. Frankenstein monster, kind of the same thing, except for the occasional explosion and a building dropping on his head. Vampires work the night shift. Mummies wait around for a few thousand years for a nosy professor to read a scroll and boil some tanna leaves and bring them back to life. So mummies, no, but the classic monsters, love to see what they're doing now. But back to Lon Chaney. Back to Lon Chaney Jr.
Well, the recipe we're going to make today is it's called Lon Chaney's Famous Chaney Pot. And by the way, it comes from this really good cookbook. You can find a lot of used copies of this floating around on Amazon or the internet. It's called It Came from the Kitchen, Monstrously Delicious Celebrity Recipes from Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Assorted Aliens, and Beyond.
I really want to get that book.
It's got mini filmographies, it's got photos, it's got like paragraphs about the stars, it's got anecdotes from the authors of the book
Mm.
who made some of these films and knew some of these. It's a treasure, and it's only like 20-30 bucks on the
What
internet.
year did
So,
that book come out?
that's a great question. I want to say, oh, and it's got cute artwork in it too. So,
Oh, very good. Okay.
yes, this book came out in 2006, so it's
Oh,
not
okay. So
that old.
fairly recent. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, fairly
Okay.
recent. And this is the famous Cheney pot recipe here, which we're going to
Cheney
make.
pot.
Now, I
All
do
right.
have to preface this a little bit. I know some people who cook and they are very, very strict about adhering to the exact recipe. I do not roll that way for a variety of reasons. First off, I'm trying to get this back in the cookbook holder here, excuse me. First off, I feel like everybody's body's different, everybody's health needs are different, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with tweaking or adjusting a recipe
Oh, of course.
to suit your. All right, it's back in the holder. Okay, to suit your needs,
Yeah.
and also this recipe would basically feed an army. It would feed an entire village essentially, and I'm just me, so. I'm gonna make what I am sort of jokingly calling the was it Maliva?
Maliva, the
Maliva,
version.
the gypsy who reads the Wolfman's fortune in the Wolfman.
Yes.
I'm gonna make an impoverished gypsy Maliva version of Lon Chaney's famous
Very good.
Chaney pot. Because this, again, I'll post the recipe online and on my HollywoodKitchenShow.com blog, but it calls for 4 pounds of beef with the bones. I mean, again, we're talking like a lot of food.
The Cheney family must have been fairly large, huh?
Right? I think he had
Wow.
like 2 kids and a wife. So I don't know if he's
Yeah.
feeding a ton of out of work actors, the neighbors. I'm not
Or
sure.
maybe this was from like an old family recipe from
Yeah, in
Lon
the
Senior
book.
days.
In the book, it says photos and recipe courtesy of Ron Chaney.
Okay.
So it does cite him as the source of the recipe in this
Okay.
book, which is cool.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe if the kids, the grandkids, the neighbors, came over or something. And I was gonna get some meat. I'm not a vegetarian, but that said, I am trying to cut down. I went to the store, a little package of meat was $10. So I quickly decided the Maliva gypsy version of
Very
this
good.
will be vegetarian, and that will be okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm basically going to do here is scale it down and just kind of eyeball it, really, because sometimes it's hard to know how much, especially again if you're just making a soup for one.
Oh,
So
sure.
while I'm assembling this, we can of course chat all about Lon Chaney Jr. My first exposure to him was when I was a little girl. They had the horror movie matinee, kind of like what you host.
Yes.
It was every Sunday at 1:00. And if I was good that week, I would get to watch it. And that's where I first saw Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Wolfman, Creature, all those movies. And it just like changed my life. It's why I'm here today. It's why I do a cemetery tour. It's pretty much the root of everything I do. And when I first saw the Wolfman, of course, it's on television with commercials, all that.
Right.
But
Right.
it still scared the daylights out of me. And I was about 6, probably at the time, 6 or 7. I used to have my dad come in my room every single night when he tucked me in and check the closets because I was so certain that Lon Chaney Jr. was in my closet. And the minute daddy shut out the lights, he was going to run out of that closet and just kill me.
Of course.
And
That's
that was in my head for quite some time. My dad can confirm this. So
that's what the films are going for, of course.
yeah. And it really stood out to me. The tragedy of the character,
Yes.
the terror of the transformation, this
Right.
man, again, who has no control over the situation. And just like Dracula's very in control.
Oh,
Wolfman,
yes.
no
Right.
control.
Right.
And then how he just, commits these acts. And sometimes they are against women. So that was also, as a little girl, you see that and you're like, oh God, because you feel already,
Right.
I don't know, vulnerable in the world, and then you see the Wolfman carrying someone through the fog, and so it really made a huge impression on me.
Oh, yeah.
And when was the first time you remembered seeing this?
It had to be the very first monster film that made an impression on me, which was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that was the first one that really got me into that kind of monster world because it presented all 3 of the classics at once. And of course, Lon Chaney is kind of the hero in that film, in that he's trying to track down and destroy Dracula and the Frankenstein monster. Um, I think that, and even in that film, that was a comedy, and I think one of the best horror comedies still to this day ever made. His pathos and his tragedy comes through, and that's pretty bold for a comedy.
Oh
To
yeah.
put that into a comedy, that was a pretty bold thing. So I was impressed with him from that film on. And of course, Lugosi, that's the second time that he played his most famous role, Dracula. He only played it 2 times on screen and was forever known as Count Dracula. He does a wonderful job in it. Of course, it's not Boris Karloff as the monster in that, it's Glenn Strange. But it was from that film that later on, and it must have been on Creature Features, our local Bay Area show with Bob Wilkins and later John Stanley, that I got my horror film education, really, and it opened up the doors to all of these worlds. Then I saw the original Wolfman and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which is much more of a direct sequel to the Wolfman than it is to any of the Frankenstein movies, really. And then of course Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein. um he was always impressive. And then also, as far as being a versatile actor, he did an entire series of Inner Sanctum films that were more supernatural-esque murder mysteries, really, that he did a wonderful job in each and every one of them. Like I said before, he's an actor that really did not get the respect
I
or
agree.
the career that he deserved. Of course, he had a lot of personal demons that he was dealing with as well. And from a midpoint on, he struggled with alcoholism and had a lot of health problems and things like that. Supposedly, he and Broderick Crawford from Highway Patrol and various other things were very good friends, and they were famous for getting into drunken fistfights for
Oh,
fun. Just for fun. They would get completely loaded and beat the hell out of each other.
you could
Just
have
for
sold
fun.
tickets for that and made
Right?
money, like a fight promoter or something, right?
Why didn't anybody set up a camera and film that?
Oh, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and really quickly go through the
Sure.
ingredients. So
Yes.
skipping the 4 pounds of beef. It says a bushel of beans. I have no idea how much that really entails, but I'm just going to add a cup of beans here.
I would assume it depends on the bushel.
I think so too. I'm going to add some onions.
There you go.
Just a little on the onion for me here. I have chopped up a stalk of celery and some carrots.
Oh.
So I'm going to add those to the stew. By the way, I started out with a base of vegetable broth as well. Okay, so 1 quart of stewed tomatoes. This isn't a quart, but stewed tomatoes I am going to add. And then, let's see, we've got, again, I kind of eyeballed the level.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I've got the peas here. Then we've got corn.
It's colorful.
It's very colorful, which is fun. We've got, I chopped up about a half of a potato. Oh, wow, this is already really a lot. Wow, this is even my scaled down gypsy version still looks like a lot of soup. Okay, and then instead of the beef bouillon, I added the broth, the vegetable broth. Now I'm going to add a little bit of seasonings. I'm skipping the cabbage. Not a huge cabbage fan, and I hate to waste, especially in a pandemic. So I'm going to add seasoned salt. All right, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. Okay, a little bit of parsley. All right, and now I'm just going to let this simmer for a while we talk about all things Lon Chaney Jr.
Right. That looks good. It looks
quite
good.
Too.
Yeah, especially for the fall. It looks like a kind of hearty fall meal.
Yeah, and honestly, I like to try to, when I pick recipes, part of my thought process is what month is it? Is it Halloween, Christmas, etc. But also I try to pick food that's fairly seasonal. It's burning hot in LA right now, but in a lot of the country or the world even, it's more autumnal. So this would be a good, tasty autumn thing to eat.
Well, you don't, I mean, well, I should talk. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, but you don't really get fall in LA. I for
No.
years traveled to Peoria, Illinois, and hosted the Drunken Zombie Film Festival that would happen in the fall. And I felt like I walked into a movie set where they're recreating fall. It's like, yeah, this is what you think of for fall. Leaves on the ground, it's cold, and the wonderful fall colors, and you don't get that in California.
You don't. And a few years ago, I attended a death convention in Boston at Mount Auburn Cemetery, and it was
Wait, hold on, a death convention?
yeah, it's hosted by Caitlin Doty, who basically has the YouTube channel Ask a Mortician, and it was like all
Oh, yeah,
about
yeah, yeah, okay.
funeral planning and death and stuff like that. And
Wow.
I went, yeah, good times. But I went with a friend. It was actually very interesting.
Oh, sure. Oh, yes, yeah.
But I went with a friend who lives in Boston, my friend Jenny,
Uh-huh.
and I had never seen a New England fall before, and I was like, cold air, leaves, and I kept taking pictures of leaves. Which God bless my friend Jenny, she wasn't the least bit embarrassed by me, and she probably could have been because I was geeking out really hard. But that was just so bizarre to me to drink a hot beverage, see pretty leaves, feel
Sure,
cool,
yeah.
wear a sweater. I was just blown away. Yeah, in LA, it's autumn because Trader Joe's whips out the pumpkin spice.
That's it. That's how you tell autumn in California, the pumpkin spice season. That's it.
Yes,
Absolutely
basically.
right. Absolutely right. Yeah.
But one thing that you mentioned that I was just thinking about with Lon Chaney Jr. is how I think the studios or maybe critics, they didn't take horror films or the stars of them seriously as
Absolutely
actors or
not.
artists. They kind of wrote it off as like a
Right.
B movie genre that anybody could step in and fill those roles, which is ridiculous.
That's right. Yeah.
And I don't know why they kind of relegated it to such B status because those movies were beautifully made, incredibly artistic.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. And again, Lon Chaney Jr. was the only one to play all the monsters, but the only actor to play the Wolfman. Multiple actors played Dracula. Multiple actors played, obviously, the Frankenstein monster, everything else. He was the only one to play the Wolfman. That was his role, uh, which, speaks to the fact that he was really the only person you can think of in that role, especially, in the Universal films. I couldn't picture, Karloff, as wonderful an actor as he was. Couldn't see him in that role. Definitely could not see Lugosi
No.
in that role, but Cheney, and given his physical stature and given just the
Big guy.
kind of guy he was, playing that role. Although I do have to say one thing, it does stretch credulity in the Wolfman that he is the son of an English lord. That's a bit strange. I mean,
And
yes, he
seeing
went
him in
away to
Claude,
America, and that's a
seeing
bit
him in,
strange.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. That's a bit strange to see him, the son of the actor, the Invisible
Claude
Man,
Rains.
Claude Rains. Thank you.
Well, to
See
see
him, the
them
son of.
standing side by side in
I
a few
know.
scenes, you just think, wow, genetics are wild.
I
Okay.
know. Like looking down, yes, father. Right? Yeah, yeah. So that, but other than that, he did a wonderful job with that. He also, the studios in the beginning, before the 40s, didn't seem to know what to do with him. He was in a film called San Antonio Rose, where they actually tried to make him a comedy team with Shemp Howard, which it didn't work, obviously. I mean, Lon, I can't think of a role where he had to exhibit comic timing. Oh, well, no, maybe one of my favorite performances of his in a weird, very bizarre film called Spider Baby. That was from the 60s. Incredible film with Sid Haig, a very young, like he was in his 20s. Sid Haig, very very strange film. He gets some comic licks in there that are quite funny and quite amusing. It's Spider Baby is a very dark comedy about the Mary family, who have a degenerative disease passed down throughout the family where you grow to puberty, but then from puberty on, you physically continue to grow, but mentally you regress. And when you regress past your childhood, before your birth, you become a cannibal. Science, I don't know. They don't explain it. It doesn't matter. But Cheney, Lon Chaney Jr. plays the caretaker of the Mary family. And it's a sympathetic role. I mean, there's a scene in there that'll just break your heart when he's with two of the girls, and they're the entire the 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 strangeness and the menace of the families being found out by the outside. Um, Really kind of a strange predecessor, though nowhere near as bloody and murderous, to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or House of a Thousand Corpses, that kind of thing. Murders do happen, but they're not nearly as bloody, and they're explained by this genetic insanity that sweeps through the family. Great film. If you haven't seen Spider Baby out there, a great one of I would say it's Lon Chaney Jr.'s last great performance.
And Turner Classic Movies is going to be showing it later this month. So
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, if you go to tcm.com and you can see their month of October, they've got a ton of great horror films coming our
That's
way.
great. I've hosted it too. Thankfully, it's in the public domain. So I've hosted it too, and it's wonderful film. Really enjoy it. So yeah, he gets some comic licks in there that are pretty good. But as far as a comedy team with Shemp Howard, I'm glad they didn't try to push that. I'd rather not have remembered Lon Chaney as a comedian.
It's interesting too when just studying classic Hollywood in general, how many stars that were incredible talents and not to mention incredibly beautiful that studios didn't know what to do with, and you just want to smack them and be like, how can you have this in front of you and not know what to do with it? That seems to kind of happen quite often, really.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, Fred Astaire supposedly, when he did his first screen test, the reaction was, "Yeah, he looks okay, can dance a little." I think it goes back to the old adage that no one in Hollywood knows what they're doing.
No.
They can preach that they have this expertise and know what the public wants. No one knows what they're doing. A lot of it's just luck. Some people are skilled craftsmen. They'll have like a track record they can go on, but a lot of it's hit and miss. Most of it is hit and miss. And
It's kind of like throwing stuff at a wall and going, okay, well,
yes,
we threw like 100 things, 2 of them stuck. Let's go with
right.
those 2.
Exactly. Though Cheney Jr. was kind of predestined just because of who his father was.
And
You
that's
know,
an interesting connection I kind of want to talk about for a minute because, even today we see a lot of children of great stars becoming actors themselves. And, on one hand, yes, they're born into wealth, they're born into fame. You would think, okay, well, they have it so easy. But on the other hand, I've kind of learned in life a bit that everybody has problems. They may look a lot
oh
different
yeah,
from my
right,
problems, but
sure,
they have
sure,
them. And
right.
I think living in the shadow of someone that powerful, that iconic, like no matter where you go or what you do with your life, you are their child, like
That's
first
right,
and foremost, and trying to shake that label and be your own man or woman or person in
right.
any way, that's got to be its own separate burden in
Oh
life.
sure.
You
Well,
know?
again, Lon Chaney Jr. His real name was Creighton Chaney. Waited till after like 5 years after his father died to go into acting because his father was so adamant that he not do it. And even then, did not want to use Lon Chaney Jr. Wanted to make his own name, but the studio said, finally forced him essentially to be Lon Chaney Jr.
When I was researching this episode, I'll send it to you. I found a recipe in a cookbook that listed him as Creighton Cheney. And I
Ah,
thought,
very good.
whoa, I wasn't expecting to find
Very
that.
good. Okay.
Yeah, so I think he was
Yeah,
Creighton Cheney for like a hot minute before they.
exactly. Yeah. I think it was by 1938, I think they were basically forcing him to use the name Lon Chaney Jr. Yeah. And a couple of other interesting things too. There was, for just a very quick period of time, interest in remaking Lon Chaney Sr.'s films with Lon Chaney Jr. The first one was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which Lon Chaney Jr. screen tested for, and he lost it to Charles Laughton. So he didn't get that. But then the studio thought that they would remake He Who Gets Slapped. Have you ever seen that film?
Oh my gosh, several times. I love that movie. It's
Isn't that
so
amazing?
beautiful.
Yeah. It's a
Oh,
surreal film about a a respected scientist who has done years of research on, I forgot exactly what, but he's at a symposium of scientists, and somebody gets up and steals his ideas and presents his ideas as their own. And Cheney gets up and says, "This is an outrage," and storms the podium, says, these are my ideas, you're presenting my work. And the guy slaps him, and everybody in the auditorium laughs. And Cheney's character has a mental breakdown, as most of Cheney's characters did so masterfully in Cheney Sr.'s films. And so much so that he later becomes famous as a clown called He Who Gets Slapped.
in the
And the
circus.
entire act is him getting slapped in the face over and over and over. And it's surreal and heartbreaking and incredible. They wanted to remake that with Chaney Jr. I don't know if you could remake that. Not with Chaney Jr., first of all, but I don't think you could remake that film as a talkie, because the silence, the silent aspect adds, it removes it from reality one step.
Yes, it's like a dreamlike
Yes, dreamlike,
state,
exactly.
like
Yes.
a bizarre, hallucinatory,
Yeah.
evil clown, lion chasing circus dream.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, and the studio decided to bail on that. So that kind of killed the whole remake
There's a
Cheney
poetry to
Sr.
that
films.
movie.
I'm sorry?
There's a poetry to that movie.
Yes.
And you would
Oh,
lose
yes.
that if you put sound to it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Because it begins with a clown, if I'm not mistaken, spinning a globe and laughing.
Yes, yes.
And then it zeroes in on the happenings in the film. Great film. Anybody out there, one, who is afraid to watch silent films, don't be. Just dive in. Just dive into them. Yes, the acting styles were a bit different because the films are silent. Um, yes, they're of a different time, so there is a different aesthetic to them, but dive in, because there are some beautiful, beautiful films out there,
I always
especially
tell
for
people,
horror fans.
I always tell people on the cemetery tour I give, I say, open your mind and a world of magic is just waiting
Absolutely.
on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Still to this day, one of the best horror films ever made is the original Nosferatu.
Yes.
Incredible. It will still send a chill down your spine to this day.
And that film, I think, turns 100 next year. So I really hope there'll
Oh,
be
I
a
don't
lot of
doubt it.
screenings of it.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful film. But specifically to dive into Chaney Sr. films, because he specialized, well, I should go back. Lon Chaney Sr.'s parents were both deaf. Cheney could hear and speak, but his parents were both deaf and mute. So he learned sign language, obviously, to communicate to his parents, and a lot of the expressiveness of his acting style comes from his knowledge of sign language. So he was able to incorporate that into the roles he played, and also growing up and have, the derision of children around him because his parents were so different. He gravitated towards roles that were outsiders, that were like I say, broken in some way, either mentally or physically, but he brought a humanity to them that was just heartbreaking and just wonderful to watch. His performance as Quasimodo, Hunchback of Notre Dame, is amazing. The end of well, I don't know if I want to split. The movie's ancient. It's not a spoiler, but the end of the Phantom of the Opera, he's being chased out of the Paris Opera House by crowds that want to kill him, and he's alongside the riverbank, and he reaches into his coat, and they back off. Oh, he's got a bomb. And he turns around to another crowd, and they back off, and he laughs, and he just opens up his hand. I have nothing. I fooled you, I have nothing. And of course they beat the hell out of him and throw him in the river. But it's that humanity, like that one last laugh, the outsider having his last joke on the normals, right?
Well, and also, I would imagine having deaf mute parents, there could probably be no better training for a silent film performer because
Right?
you have to
Yeah.
communicate so much with your eyes, your face, your hands. And one of my favorite Cheney performances and scenes of Cheney Sr.
Mm.
is the unknown, especially the
Oh.
end of the unknown, which spoiler alert, where he finds out Joan Crawford has changed her mind about being touched,
Right.
and just the look on his face and the emotions of horror and then kind of laughing at the ridiculousness and then being devastated. That is just like
Yes.
a master class of
Well,
film acting.
and it's it's earned in that movie because Cheney plays isn't it the armless?
I forget the name of the character, but yeah,
It's not Frozo. That's from another
Alonzo
movie.
the Armless. I think it's
Alonzo the Armless.
Yeah.
But he's not really armless. He's hiding out in a circus as an armless wonder who can do like light cigarettes with his feet and that kind of
think the
thing.
reason is he had an extra digit on his finger and he was a
Right.
criminal and that would identify him. So he kind of strapped his arms behind his back.
Exactly. And Joan Crawford plays a woman who cannot stand to be touched. It's just a phobia. She cannot stand to be touched. Cheney's character is deeply in love with her. So what he decides to do is have his perfectly good arms amputated so that, I can't possibly touch you. So they fall in love. He goes away, does that, comes back and finds out she's changed her mind. She's fallen in love with the strong man. No, the equestrian guy from the circus. And he starts out laughing and the laugh escalates. It's a silent film. The laugh escalates into a scream of his mind shattering that you will swear you can hear. If you can't hear, you can hear it in here. You can hear that mind just go.
I've seen that film so many times with live accompaniment, but it's never been with an orchestra. I would love to see what an orchestra or a bigger ensemble can do with a film like that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And of course, Cheney, we haven't mentioned yet, a master of transforming himself, not only through makeup, but just physical contortions. In a film called The Miracle Man, he plays basically a con man who plays a cripple who can reorganize his body and as though he's being healed of having this misshapen body. And he was a magical performer. He really was. And to go back to Lon Chaney Jr., to grow up in that shadow and to become an actor, he had a lot to contend with. As a matter of fact, Lon Chaney Jr. was pretty good with makeup. He plays the caveman chief in 100 BC, 100 million BC, 100 million BC. 1 million BC is the title of the film. And he designed his own makeup. And there are pictures of it floating around the internet, but because of union rules and things like that, he wasn't able to use his own makeup. Be interesting to see what he could have accomplished if he had continued with the makeup and with, gone down that path as well.
There's so much we don't know about his life with his dad, but I kind of wonder, because Lon Chaney was always testing out makeups at home, and I kind of wonder how much of that he got to kind of witness or, watch.
Yeah, the story kind of is that he was a distant father. So I always kind of picture him doing these makeups just kind of by himself and being his own judge. Although there's also the famous story of Lon Chaney doing, I cannot remember the name of the film, where he plays an old Chinese worker.
Dr. Wu.
Is it Dr. Wu?
I think it's Dr. Wu, I think.
Okay, where he got on the cable cars in LA, or the streetcars in LA, and rode them back and forth to see if anybody looked at him sideways or noticed if he was Lon Chaney, or if, that was makeup he was wearing. Nobody noticed. So his makeup was not only screen ready, it was the real thing. And of course, his performance is just, absolutely incredible, of course. And again, Cheney had a lot to contend with, having him as a father, being a world famous actor, and then going into acting. It's brave of him, really. He must have really loved acting, because he was a fairly successful executive with an appliance company, and he left that to go full on into acting, so he must have loved it.
Well, and his mother was a vaudeville singer, performer, so he kind of was
Yes,
born into that world where that
that's
was
true.
probably in his blood
That's
almost
true.
from the beginning. And it's not only going into the same career, but the same genre of horror, at least to a large degree, So that
I
had to really been difficult.
I think that was probably thrust on him, you
Yeah,
know,
I agree.
because Senior died in Lon Chaney Senior died in 1930.
Mhm.
Had he not died, he would have played Dracula. And then of course he would have gone on to play the Frankenstein monster, to play a game of what if he had lived, he probably would have been every Universal classic monster. They would have tailored it just for him. That's how big a star he was.
It's so
When
interesting. I'm sorry.
no, when he died, that's how big a star he was. Yeah.
It's so interesting to think that how film history changes with one thing happening. Like had he
Oh,
not passed away so young, he's
right.
47.
I
What
know.
how the course of film history would have been very different had he lived a much longer life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We might have come to know the names Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, but not in the way we know them today. I mean, Karloff was doing reasonably well as a character actor. Lugosi was Dracula on stage. Maybe we would know him as a Broadway actor or a stage actor primarily. Of course, Lon Chaney, the Wolfman, John Carradine as Dracula. I don't think any of that probably would have happened had Lon Chaney Sr. lived. Had Lon Chaney Sr. lived, Lon Chaney Jr. probably would not have become an actor either, because his father would have been so dead set against it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder why he was so dead set. If he just thought it was such a hard life, he didn't want the son to do it, or I kind of wonder what made him so against it.
Yeah, it is so hard to say. I mean, if you believe anything from the movie The Man of a Thousand Faces, which is largely a fictitious
Very much so.
biography of Lon Chaney, um, it was because it was such a hard life and such a hard trade to make a living in, supposedly. There might have been a bit of ego in there too. Show business isn't big enough for two Cheneys, for two famous Cheneys.
That could have been part
Hard
of
to
it.
say. It's very, very hard to say. Yeah, I don't. We can only speculate. I don't know.
Lon Chaney Sr. strikes me as a very fascinating but very complicated and private man.
Yes.
And I think our friend David Skull and also Michael
Yes.
Blake have done so much research and writing on him, but I honestly don't know that anyone's ever going to crack who he was as a human being because he wouldn't let people into his world like that.
He did not do interviews, from what I understand. There's a scene, or not a scene, but a promotional film. I believe it is Universal Studios, of all of their stars.
Oh, MGM. It's where they
Is
do
it
the
MGM?
MGM
Okay.
lineup, and Cheney turns his back to shake someone's hand and literally
Yes.
comes away from the camera. Yeah,
Yes, and steals it because everybody else is just standing there and posing for the camera.
mugging.
It's just, you get a glimpse of him and he turns around and starts talking to somebody to his right. He knew how to maintain that air of mystery.
And I think that reticence for him and for Greta Garbo, it only enhanced the allure
That's
and
right.
the fame and the interest in them.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's said that Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, regretted that he was so open with interviews when Star Trek came out. He should have promoted this story of nobody knows where this guy came from, and they think he lives in a cave outside of L.A. and he talks to nobody.
Well,
Promote
today
that
with
man of
social
mystery.
media, I think that you know so much about
Yes.
stars. And
Yeah.
to me, I like a sense of mystery. I don't need to know about the daily minutia of an actor, actress, whoever that I like. I would rather have mystery. I think that's more interesting.
Yeah, when with Chaney Sr., when you went to see a Chaney Sr. film, you didn't know what you were going to see. you didn't go to see the star. You went to see what he was going to transform himself into. Total chameleon. I mean, more so than almost any other actor today. Complete chameleon. And for the silent era, amazing. Really incredible.
Yeah, I love that story on for the Phantom of the Opera. He had it in his contract that the makeup would not be shown in any advertising and it would be like censored. And then early in the film, you don't see him for a while in the film. You just see a shadow.
Yes,
So
that's
the
right.
way they built that up was really masterful.
It really was. As opposed to the Wolfman, where that makeup is dead center in the posters, in the promotion, in the trailer. Yeah, shows how things changed from the 20s to the 40s, and the
Maybe
sense of showmanship too. There's it's, in my opinion, it's almost totally gone today, but it shows you how the sense of showmanship waned even from the 20s to the 40s. It should have been just the wolf man, and what's he going to look like, question marks all over the poster.
or just like a claw, like part of a furry claw with like a little bit of blood, like something that to entice the audience without giving it away.
That's exactly it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Chaney Jr., like we had said before, had struggles with alcoholism. There's the famous episode of Tales of Tomorrow where he plays the Frankenstein monster. It's a little half-hour adaptation of Frankenstein. And he was basically so drunk during the live performance that he thought it was the dress rehearsal. So I don't know if you've ever seen this, but he's supposed to be rampaging and like destroying furniture, and thinking it's the dress rehearsal, he would pick up a chair and then put it down gingerly and fake smashing the chair. And at one point he's about to walk off camera and he accidentally knocks over a chair and looks into the camera and says, sorry, and goes on. It's like, oh, Lon. It's a really interesting thing to watch, but then you also, knowing the backstory of it, just feel for the guy. It's like, he's trying his best here, and because of his, personal demons are just, getting to him at this point. He would say later on in his career, to a director on any project he was in, get everything you can before noon, because after that I'm no good, unfortunately. But going back to Spider Baby, he abstained from drinking during Spider Baby because he thought, just on the strength of that script and that movie, he knew it was going to be a performance he could really get into and really do a good job with. And it is, definitely is.
I noticed also in kind of watching a lot of these old horror films and studying the lives of these actors, is there seemed to be some of them who were kind of tortured by the typecasting, and they fought so heavily against it, and they wanted to show there was so much more they could do, like say Bela Lugosi, Peter Lorre. And then you had others like Vincent Price and Boris Karloff who seemed to completely lean into it, embrace it, and be like, hey, I'm a horror star, that's what I do, all right. And they just didn't fight City Hall, as it were. They just completely went with it. So it seems to be two very different schools of thought, and how to respond to that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, Lon had a pretty good career as a character actor in a lot of non-horror films. I believe he's got a role in High Noon. He's got a really good role in The Defiant Ones. Various other, and did a lot of TV and anthology series and things like that. So, but his bread and butter really were kind of going back to the horror films. In the 50s and 60s, towards the end, those were the last jobs he did. He went to Mexico and did a horror film called The Face of the Screaming Werewolf, which was, I believe, the last time he portrayed a werewolf on screen. His last film, I believe it was his last film, Dracula versus Frankenstein, he didn't even speak. He had no lines at all, and he played, I think it was Grotto, the crazed zombie. I think it was Grotto. He didn't even speak in that role, which is, it's a tragic thing to see the arc of his career. It was fairly tragic, but he gave a lot of incredible performances. And it was by all reports the most affable, gracious guy, that you could meet. Fun loving, uh loved dogs. Was famous for the number of dogs he had. He had a lot of famous dislikes though too. Evelyn Ankers, his co-star in The Wolfman and a lot of other films, he reportedly despised her. I don't know what the root of that was, what caused that, what personally happened between them, but he supposedly could not stand her. But they were in a lot of movies together, which must have been no treat for either one of them, I guess. But you couldn't tell by watching the performance.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. And I know that a lot of the Cheney family members today are very active in promoting Lon Chaney Sr. and Jr. And they are frequently doing conventions and signings and events. And I really admire how much the Karloff, the Cheney, and the Lugosi families have been active in promoting these legacies.
Oh yeah, definitely. Not only promoting those actors, but classic horror in general. Like I said before, well, there are people who will not watch silent films. There are even people who will not watch black and white films, mostly younger people today, that some just won't watch black and white films. And you're denying yourself over half of film history. I mean, if you consider yourself a film fan and you enjoy movies, then you've got to go back into the silent era and into the black and white era at least, and then hopefully move on into the silent era. But you've got to have a respect for these incredible films because they are the roots of what you're seeing today. And black and white has its own magic to it. There are some films that should never, ever, ever be colorized.
I agree.
They lose. You were talking about the cat people and the producer Val Lewton. Yeah. None of his films should ever be colorized because you'll lose the atmosphere of the film.
And also for me, the imagination. Like I love black and white, and there's some films that they are so much better in black and white, and they never ever need to be colorized, or they shouldn't. You know what I mean? Like some people, I wish that was in color. It's like, no, it needs to be black and white. It wouldn't be the same feeling or the same emotion or atmosphere if it were color.
Right. And it's an almost totally different art form too, because in black and white, you play with the shadows and the atmosphere of it is just wonderful. The classic horror films, thank God from what I understand, they are archived and will never be colorized. So that's a good thing. But definitely don't be afraid of black and white films, young people.
Yes, again, magic is waiting on you. Just open your mind.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Lord Blood Rah, how about we take some questions from people on Facebook?
Let's do it.
See what the folks are saying. Here, just a second here. And,
I actually forgot we were streaming. This is just, I just feel like the conversation was wonderful.
I know, right? It's totally fun. Let me pull this up and see. Come on, phone. Please don't do this to me. Not today.
And technology.
Yes, that's always a battle for me. Krista Lawler. Hello, Krista. She's asking, what is your favorite Lon Chaney Jr. film?
Oh. Wow. Like anytime I'm asked the question, what is your favorite this film or that film? It really depends on the day.
Me too.
Yeah, it depends on the day. Talking so much about Spider Baby right now, I'm going to say Spider Baby. But, later on, it could be Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein. It could be the original Wolfman itself. One of the Frozen Eyes, I believe. He does a great job in that film. It's one of the Inner Sanctum mystery films. I'll go with Spider Baby today.
Besides from the Wolfman, for me, a few years ago, I was at the UCLA Film Archive, and they showed the most astounding sepia tone print of Mice and Men. And that print was like, bring a tear to your eye.
Oh, yeah.
To see that on a giant screen. Oh my gosh.
There's something about sepia tone anyway that just evokes this emotion, even just photography. It's just, yeah, there's something heartbreaking about sepia tone.
Gary Songer is asking, did Lon Chaney Jr. have a good relationship with his stepmother? Because we know Cheney Sr. divorced Cleva, and then he married, I believe her name was Hazel Hastings.
Hazel Hastings, yes.
And do we know what kind of relationship they had?
You know, there's not a lot that I know about that relationship. I know his relationship with his father was strained. I would imagine that would have affected his relationship with Hazel as well, because Lon Sr. was kind of known as being fairly domineering. So I would imagine that pretty much what he said goes. So I can't, it could have been a perfectly loving relationship. I don't know, but I imagine it probably wasn't all it could have been, given the strained relationship he had with his father.
And she got cancer and died just a couple of years after Lon. So
oh wow.
I think she died about 33 or so.
33, yeah, because
if I'm not mistaken, but I don't think she lived that much longer than he did.
Wow. So yeah, hard to say.
Val Luton's films need to be left alone, no color. I am agreeing with you, Kristen.
Absolutely.
I second that emotion for sure. Let's see. Hang on. Sometimes these comments pop up way later after the episode, and I'm like, dang it. So, I know, that's so irritating. Let me see.
It's not a good time to ask the questions.
I am constantly in a battle with technology. That's just my life.
Oh, aren't we all? Yeah. It's a wonderful thing until it isn't. That's what I always say about technology.
Very, very, very much so.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. All right, if you do have questions, please send them in. I'm going to try really hard to see if my phone will refresh. Fingers crossed.
How's the Cheney pot coming?
You know, it looks pretty good. Here's how it looks, actually. I'm going to try to show this to the camera without dumping it all over the floor.
That would be, yeah, so that looks good. That looks good.
And let's see. You know, another thing that I think is interesting for me is someone that loves historic cemeteries. It's really meaningful to me to go visit Astaire's grave or bring them flowers or sit there. And I've done that for Vampira and Bela Lugosi and Gregory, et cetera. One thing that's interesting about Lon Chaney Sr., he is at Forest Lawn, which is like 2 minutes from where I live. And his crypt is not accessible to the public and there's no name on it at all.
I've heard that, yeah.
Which is so on brand, really.
Man of mystery to the end, yeah.
Yeah, and then Lon Chaney Jr., from what I have been told, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I had heard he donated his body to science.
Again, on brand.
Very on brand. And then Vincent Price was scattered in the Pacific Ocean, as far as I know. So it kind of frustrates me that I cannot pay tribute at their direct burial spot. But on the other hand, that's obviously what they wanted. And it is on brand. And really, I always say this on every cemetery tour I give. I say, I can show you graves. I can tell you stories. Watch the movies.
Yes.
Right there.
Yeah, to appreciate the performances. That's really the best way, I think, to pay tribute to these actors that have gone on. I think,
absolutely. I think that's probably what they would want. They would say, "My work speaks for me," just like that. So
and Chaney Sr. again, he started in vaudeville, so he had a sense of showmanship coming from the stage that, again, I think is completely dead today. Which is unfortunate. Speaking of showmanship, now here's a curious what if. I wonder why William Castle never worked with Lon Chaney Jr.
That's a great question.
That would have been an interesting pairing to see what Chaney Jr. and William Castle could have cooked up together, because I could only imagine that Lon would go full on into the whole William Castle showmanship and just love it. He had kind of a sense of humor in that way. Later on in his career, Chaney Jr. released a couple of albums that were A Monster's Holiday is a song that he did. As a matter of fact, I keep talking about Spider Baby. He sings the theme song for
Oh
Spider
my gosh,
Baby.
I forgot
Yeah,
that.
which is it's amazing on its own. And in researching Cheney, I found an album called Ticklish Tales of Terror that he and Bobby Boris Pickett of Monster Mash fame did together. And Lon reads a couple of kind of children's horror stories in it. And Bobby Boris Pickett, who I never knew was kind of an accomplished mimic and voice actor, did a great Karloff, of course, in the Monster Mash, but does a number of voices in this. It's a very fun album. It's on YouTube. I found it on YouTube. You can go there and listen to it.
Send me the link. I want to check that out.
I will. I will. And the flip side of it is John Wayne and Gabby Hayes meeting Count Dracula. And it's wild. Now, Cheney has nothing to do with that end of it, but he did a few like comedic recordings towards the end of his life as well. So his sense of humor, I think, would have fed into William Castle's aesthetic very well.
Oh, yeah. Lisa Dare is asking, Carrie and Lord Blood Rah, what have you heard about the Cheney family memoir, A Century of Cheneys?
Absolutely nothing. Is it out now? Is it coming out? I don't know.
Before this episode, I reached out to two members of the Cheney family twice and asked if they would like to be on here, and I never heard back, which is okay. I mean, when you have two horror icons in your family, I kind of assume October is pretty busy.
Sure.
But if I do get in touch with any of them and I'm able to get an answer, I will certainly post it. Sure.
Sure, yeah.
But I think it's a great idea. I would certainly be fascinated to read, not just about Lon and Jr., but Cleva and the other members of the family. And
oh, yeah. Yeah, because I think anybody interested in the Cheneys, I really hope they did not take Man of a Thousand Faces as the be all end all, because it is largely fictionalized. It touches on truth at some points, like Cleva did very publicly on stage try to commit suicide in front of Lon and that kind of thing, but most of it is just made for the movie.
Funk.
Yeah, yeah.
Gary Saunders says, Lon Jr. is wonderful along with Peter Lorre and Boris Karloff in a Halloween episode of Route 66.
Yes, Owlet's Wing and Lizard's Tail, I think is what it's called. Yes, that's really interesting. That's an interesting thing about Cheney too, especially in that episode, is it's Karloff, Peter Lorre, and Cheney. Boris Karloff is Boris Karloff. He's the English gentleman that you would expect. Peter Lorre is the impish, kind of slightly sinister guy that he's known for being. Lon is a big child. Lon, he just plays this big child that just loves scaring people. As a matter of fact, it opens with him in Quasimodo makeup creeping up on his grandson. And I believe it's Ron. Ron Chaney, right? I think it is. And trying to scare him. So, oh, grandpa, that kind of thing. There's a scene where he's in werewolf makeup and he's about to he charges into a convention of secretaries, which is the politically incorrect term for today, but it was used back then, and scares all of them and is thrilled that he's scared all these women. There's a scene before that where he tried to scare somebody and didn't, and he starts crying like a child. So it's interesting for him to take that persona as not the kind of respected actor, gentleman, just a kid, just a big kid. I don't know how much of that was his input or just the script was written that way and he flew with it. I don't know, but yeah, Owlet's Wing and Lizard's Tail from Route 66. Check it out; it's very fun.
Oh, yeah. Someone is saying I need to watch Spider Baby. Excellent.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. It's out there on a lot of streaming services. If I may say, I have hosted it myself. It's a great public domain film. Yeah, definitely check out Spider Baby. It's one of my favorites. And if you're, I'm sorry, if you're a fan of Sid Haig, you get a look at Sid like you've never seen him before. 20 years old, gangly, young Sid Haig. It's wonderful.
Darren Barnes is saying, I have to ask, as in Darren Barnes has been on several, we've done 3 Norma Shearer episodes.
Okay.
We were determined until we got a Norma Shearer recipe we could eat. So that was awesome. Darren is saying, I have to ask, as a Norma Shearer collector, why is Tower of Lies never mentioned? In the documentaries on Lon's films, it gets skipped over and never mentioned or discussed.
I have to admit, I've never heard of this film, Tower of Lies.
Yeah,
Interesting.
If I'm not mistaken, and correct me anybody if I am, I think that's a lost film. And
are we talking a silent film?
Yeah. And
I see. Oh, it's Chaney Sr. then. Oh,
Senior,
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, again, I'd have to look it up. Please chime in, Darren and Krista, if I'm wrong. But I think that it was Norma Shearer and John Gilbert as well. I think it was made right on the heels of He Who Gets Slapped. Again, if I'm not, this is off the top of my head.
Okay.
But,
yeah, it's so tragic, lost films. Like talking about Chaney Sr., Tower of London, not Tower of London.
London After Midnight.
London After Midnight, yes. We've got those incredible stills.
1926 film with William Haynes. Tower of Lies. Okay.
Tower of Lies.
William Haynes. Okay.
Okay.
And I kind of get a little OCD, and I think sometimes about lost silence, and it tortures me that there are films I will never see. That drives me crazy. Like, I'll think about them. I'm like, I have to see it. I have to find a way.
Oh, yes.
It's like of inventing a time machine. There's some that I will never see, but
or even lost scenes. For Lon Chaney Jr. in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. And this also with Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi plays the monster in it, and he had lines as the monster. And studio executives saw it, and supposedly the story is test audiences heard Dracula's voice coming out of the monster and laughed. So they cut all of his lines. There are scenes where you can see Bela's mouth move, but it's just silent. It's just absolutely silence. And he's supposed to be blind in the film. That's why he's walking with the arms outstretched and things like that. But there was a wonderful scene. Somebody reconstructed it from stills that exist from the scene, excuse me, and the shooting script. But there's a scene shortly after Larry Talbot finds the Frankenstein monster frozen, and he thaws him out. And it's a dialogue scene between the monster and Larry Talbot. And the monster is saying, as Bela Lugosi as Igor, because Igor's brain is now in the monster's body. He said, "I'm sick. I'm sick. I want to be healthy. I want to be strong." And Larry Talbot tells him, "Well, when the full moon rises, I become a wolf." And the monster goes, "You're kidding." I would give anything to see that scene with Bela Lugosi as the Frankenstein monster going, "You're kidding." To Larry Talbot. That entire scene, it supposedly it's lost forever. I have hopes that it's going to show up in somebody, somebody's got it in a paper bag somewhere in their closet. That
I don't know if you saw, I posted on social media the other day, they found a complete silent film in Peoria, Illinois the other day.
Really?
It's thought to be lost. Yeah, I'll send you the link. And I saw that and I was like, oh, please. I burned the candle of eternal hope that more silence are going to keep resurfacing.
There's hope. There's hope. Well, our friend David Scow rescued the Spanish version of Dracula.
The best. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I know. He hunted that thing down and found it. We have that film today because of him.
Oh, Tower of Lies was from 1925. And it was directed by Victor Seastrom, who directed He Who Gets Slapped.
Oh.
And it's Norma Shearer and Lon Chaney.
What is there anything on the plot or?
I'll send you a link, but
okay.
It says the theme is a Swedish farmer finds joy in the birth of a daughter, but his landlord separates them. I don't know. This is a mystery of why this film is never discussed.
Interesting.
Wow, that is a mystery. I don't know what
Hmm.
to say other than I sure do wish I could see it and have
Yeah.
more information.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think about the number of works for Lon Chaney Sr. that are just lost now when the the body of work that we have is so extraordinary. What's been lost?
Yeah. Oh, Annette Bochanek, one of my Bohanic, excuse me, one of my friends and frequent
Hmm.
guests, she said 2 minutes of a Theta Bara film was also just discovered. So
All right, well,
I cling to
there's
hope.
hope. There's
I
hope.
cling to hope.
There's hope. Maybe they'll find London After Midnight at some point. One
You know,
one can only
I've
hope.
talked to David Skull about this just recently because next week is our episode is pre-recorded because he and I are both busy next week, but
Sure.
it's a Lon Chaney Sr. episode, and we talk about, and Danny Muller co-hosts it with me, and we talk about London After Midnight, and he said that, some people have seen it that he talked to that saw it when they were little,
Mhm.
and they said it wasn't really that good. So
Yeah,
I kind of sometimes wonder if it's all the more tantalizing because we don't have it and because it's a mystery,
probably so.
you
Probably so.
know?
I mean, Forey Ackerman saw it as a child and said, "Yeah, it's not that good." He said, actually, the Bela Lugosi film Mark of the Vampire is a remake of London After Midnight, and he seemed to believe that film was better than Chaney's version. So, but
Oh,
that iconic vampire look that Cheney has, luckily we've got the stills and we've got that iconic face with all the teeth and the sunken eyes and the top hat.
yes. Oh, Monique in Amsterdam is letting us know that
Oh,
a Valentino film was discovered several years ago in Amsterdam. I think that one was Beyond the Rocks.
oh,
So
wow.
yes, these things do turn up. Convention
Wow.
City, that's a pre-code that I'm also holding out the eternal flame that
Uh,
it will be found.
Valentino's another actor that, had he not died so young and tragically, what his career would have become.
I talk about that a lot because, of course, he's on my cemetery tour, and I've been the Lady in Black for a long time now, or
Mhm.
one of them. But yeah, some people think he might have gone the way of John Gilbert, which is to say the romantic image did not really translate into sound. I like to
Hmm.
think, though, that he could have been bigger in sound like Greta Garbo. I think had they
Okay.
found the right transitionary vehicle for him, maybe given him a lot of time to work on it, kept him from it for a while, did the same strategy and
Sure.
care that MGM took with Greta Garbo's transition, I think he could have been fantastic in pre-code. Oh my
Hmm.
gosh,
Hmm. Well, Lon Chaney Sr. proved that he could transition into talkies. He only did one shortly before he died, and it was a remake of The Unholy Three. But in it, he does a couple of different voices. He plays a ventriloquist
the old grandmother in
criminal,
it.
the old grandmother, and he does the
Mhm.
voice wonderfully, and of course the mannerisms and everything. So he proved he could have kept his career going in sound films, but just passed away. Just
And
passed
some
away
people
shortly after
think
the movie.
Valentino would have been a great Dracula. So it's kind of
You know,
tantalizing to think about the possibilities of if had a lot of things happen differently in the world.
yeah, that's where my mind was going. Yeah, is that he could have yeah, he could have been a really interesting Dracula.
I would love to have seen him in so many pre-codes. I really think there could have been a lot of great stuff, you
Mm,
know, that we obviously didn't get to have.
yeah.
But let's see if we have any more questions rolling in. Are relatives still alive? Yes, there is Ron Chaney,
Hmm.
Josh Chaney. There are
Hmm.
multiple Cheneys that are still out there. And as we
Hmm.
mentioned, they're very involved in the Ron Chaney
They
legacy.
make convention appearances. As a matter of fact, that's where I got this changing portrait
Excellent.
of, if you can see that, of Lon from the Chaney family collection. Yeah, keep a lookout for your local conventions, and they may pop up there.
Definitely. Let me hit refresh, see if we have any more comments coming in.
Okay.
Would you mind if people have any more comments, Lord Blood Rah, of like going in there and answering the question or two on the Facebook page?
Sure. Yeah. No
Yeah.
problem. No
Oh,
problem at all.
cool. Okay. Excellent. Well, people love the
Just
portrait.
oh,
Great.
cool.
Well, I
What is
think
it? I'm
that's it.
curious. What is the Cheney pot smelling like? Because there's a lot of aromatic in there.
Hmm. It's It smells kind of tomatoey because I definitely used a lot of tomatoes. I think it needs to cook just a tiny bit longer to
Oh, I would
soften
bet,
up
yeah.
some of the potatoes. But it smells very tomato and potato-esque.
Okay.
Those are words at all.
Tomato-esque, I'll buy it, sure.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it for the questions at the moment. But
Okay,
any
no problem.
final thoughts or final comments about Chaney Jr.?
Just look at his works. I mean, the Wolfman would not have been. By the way, I believe that was originally Karloff was going to be the Wolfman. All respect to Karloff, it would have been a very, very different character. He would not have had the physicality of
No.
Lon, that big, burly, hulking, a thinner Karloff werewolf would have been kind of
Angular.
scary. But angular, yeah, right, exactly, yeah. Seek out his works. The classic Universal monster films would not have been the same without, especially the monster rallies, without Cheney, because he was one of the through lines from House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Look at Cheney's Inner Sanctum films, even some of his lesser known films. I hosted a film called The Devil's Messenger, which is an anthology film made up of episodes of a Swedish TV series called 13 Demon Street that you can find episodes of it probably on YouTube. I would imagine they did a public domain release of them a while back, but he was essentially the host of this anthology series where he was a criminal who was condemned after death to find a more heinous criminal than he. So he goes through these stories looking for worse criminals than himself. And they took 3 of these episodes and packaged them together in a film called The Devil's Messenger, in which Lon Chaney plays Satan, sending these presents, these gifts to people on the surface and affecting their lives through these gifts. It's a fun film. It's a fun little anthology film. Look at Lon Chaney's works. Watch Spider Baby. Definitely watch Spider Baby. Try to find the episode of Route 66. And I think you'll get Owlet's Wing and Lizard's Tail, and I think you'll get kind of an insight into the way Cheney wanted people to perceive him. I think because he's basically just a big kid in it, Oh, and also look for, and this is probably, everything's on YouTube, so it's probably on YouTube. There's a segment of an old 50s TV show called You Asked for It. And people would write in every week and ask to see various stars, various stunts, various whatever. And one of them was Lon Chaney Jr. And he talks about his father's acting style, and as we talked about, how his knowledge of sign language and communicating with his parents informed his acting style, and how Lon Chaney Jr. was very into helping the deaf community within the 1950s. Look for that clip. It's a very nice clip, and Lon is very down to earth and doing this interview and promoting this this foundation that he's working with for the deaf. I would love to have met him. I would love to have met him. He's one of those characters that kind of had a larger than life, a lot of tragedy, a lot of problems, a lot of personal demons, but had the career that he had through all of them. So here's to him.
I agree.
Yeah.
So where can people find you, Lord Blood Rah, if they want to look you up on the internet, watch your videos, listen to your radio shows? How can people track you down?
Well, the best thing to do is go to lordbloodrah.com. It's LORDBLOODRAH.com. I post a new episode there every Friday of the show Lord Blood Rah's Nerve Wracking Theater. in which I host the best, worst, and wildest horror and science fiction films ever made. You can find the TV schedule and streaming schedule there to find where you can find my show on Roku, on broadcast TV, all across the country. And I have two new ventures. One of them is a Patreon exclusive TV series called Lord Blood Rah's Cathode Zone, in which I host episodes of classic horror and sci-fi TV shows like One Step Beyond, Suspense, and other anthology series that dabbled in horror and suspense occasionally, GE theater and those kind of things. And you can find that at patreon.com/Lord Blood Rah. There's a link at lordbloodrah.com. And the latest is, as you said, a radio series called Lord Blood Rah's Nerve-Wracking Auditorium, in which I host old horror radio shows.
That is so cool.
Which, it's pure theater of the mind. And these are things that go all the way back into the 1930s. In fact, I'm kind of an aficionado of horror host history. Vampira was the very first television horror host. The very first horror host in any electronic medium was old Nancy, the Witch of Salem, from The Witch's Tale. And the latest episode that you'll find on lordbloodrah.com under Auditorium is an episode of The Witch's Tale called The Devil Doctor. It's very, very fun. And I release these every Saturday. You can find them on lordbloodrah.com under Auditorium. If you happen to be in Davis, California, you can listen to them every Saturday night at 11:30 on KDRT 95.7 FM. And I'm hoping to add more radio stations to it and have hopes of turning it into a podcast and getting the Auditorium out there a bit more, because I would really like to see audio dramas, especially audio horror and audio science fiction, get a little bit better known, because especially when you talk about horror and science fiction, especially nowadays, what's on the screen is due to the amount of budget that the director has, either the constraints or the ridiculously huge budgets that they have. With audio horror and science fiction, it's all in your head. They just feed you the sounds, they feed you the performances, and the terror is as real as you want to make it. The monster is as gruesome as you want to make it. The awe of the science fiction stories it all comes from the ether of your own imagination. And I've always been a big fan of old-time radio horror. So you can find all of that. The best thing to do is go to lordbloodrah.com, and you'll find all of that there. Oh,
Lord Blood Rah.
I'm sorry. One more thing, and they'll kill me if I don't mention this. In Northern California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, I also host a monthly live show called Chiller Diller Theater at the Orinda Theater, in which we call it your Saturday night monster matinee. And it's a regular show, the third Saturday night of every month, and we present classic horror and science fiction films. And coming up on the 16th of October, we're doing the Vincent Price classic, Theater of Blood.
Oh, I love that movie.
Isn't that a fantastic film? Yeah, it was his favorite too, by all reports. Yeah. So you can find all that information again at lordbloodrah.com. And thank you so much for having me on.
This was delightful, Lord Blood Rah. Yes. And I really hope we can hang out next time I'm in San Francisco, or next time you're in LA. Come down here, I'll visit some cemeteries.
You came out for the Universal Monster Party that David was thank God he was there, and I unfortunately was ill and could not. I was looking forward to that event all year, and I knew you were coming out, and luckily Derek Zemrak, who owns the Orinda Theater, stepped in to host, and I understand it was a great event, and I wish I could have been there, and I was looking forward to meeting you. But yeah, next time in the Bay Area, we have to meet, definitely.
Yes, and I know you're super busy this time of year in particular, so thank you so much for joining me today. And to everybody watching, I hope you can go to Lord Blood Rah's website and just go down the rabbit hole of his incredible content. I think you will really find a lot of gems for the Halloween season.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And thank you for watching Hollywood Kitchen, folks. So stay tuned for so much more food, fun, and film history in the weeks ahead.
Geek out.